Hey, Sophie.
Hi.
Will you take a few moments to introduce yourself, please?
Well, my name is Sophie Roman. I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but I currently live in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I am co-founder and CEO of the Pop Shop.
You've stepped into CEO role now, which I've impressed by, and I feel like it's awesome for you.
Yeah, it's surreal for me. I guess I never kind of saw myself as a CEO, really of of a business. But if I'm going to be CEO of anything, I think something as awesome as like a fresh fruit soda company with this like very bright and busy brand is very fitting for me.
I love your branding. I've looked at the website recently, and it perfectly captures the quirkiness. I think you even put the word on there of you guys. You guys are quirky and fun and awesome.
Yeah, thank you. The branding really encapsulates. I mean, you can just kind of see that that's just kind of how I live my life. I love color. Color makes me happy. Luckily for us, fruit is very colorful, and being around the fruit makes me happy. And so we just kind of wanted to put ourselves and how color and shapes make us feel, and make that part of our brand, and because it's very much how it reflects on us.
So for listeners and also viewers on YouTube, what can you tell us? What is Pop Shop in a nutshell?
So yeah, as a typical entrepreneur, I just dove right in. The Pop Shop basically is fresh fruit sparkling beverages. So we source almost all of our ingredients from here on the island in Puerto Rico. Everything is made from fresh fruits, sugar, and water. We don't use preservatives or chemical stabilizers, or any added chemical sweeteners or colors. So everything is just kind of showing off the abundance of fruit and the variety of fruit here on the island, while also giving people kind of a better way to enjoy soda without having to feel like, God, what am I drinking?
Right, because growing up, we drank Pepsi and Coke and Mountain Dew and Surge, which is poison.
Very true. Wow. Yeah.
And so that the chemicals and I imagine the sugar in there are actually
right.
quite.
I mean, not to get too much on my own like platform, but
Please go on your soapbox.
if you compare like say our orange soda with like the big orange soda, there it's kind of scary. I'm not one who's a woo-woo person. I don't seek out all organic. It's actually precisely because I love junk food that I wanted better ways to enjoy it without actually putting junk in my body. So if you look at like a big name brand orange soda, there's nothing, not even remotely close to oranges in there, or fruit or anything. And so for me, it just felt like, well, I like orange soda and oranges taste good. To me, the equation was just so simple. Why not put oranges in orange soda?
Seems like rocket science. Cool. So soda in cans, healthy, and real ingredients.
Right.
And started in Lancaster, where we met, of course, through Mark, who's also been on the podcast and a listener of the podcast. So hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
And took the brand and the company from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that transition?
Yeah. I know that's really weird, right? Well, I'm like a native of Lancaster. I was born there. I grew up in Northern Virginia, but then I came back to Lancaster in like high school. I left for college and I came back. So I've had this very strong connection and relationship with Lancaster. Um, and I worked in the bars there, which are some of the best bars in the region, but I was never really a big drinker. So I learned the craft of cocktail making, though it was just never something that I was really into. Along comes Mark. He and I met at the social enterprise pitch in Lancaster in 2017 when I was pitching an art magazine, which is what I do. I'm an artist. And he wanted to bring his popcorn down to Lancaster. And he was kind of moving from a farmer's market to wanting to have a whole brick and mortar. And for me, it was just like, great, well, you're going to need things to go with this popcorn. I know how to make a good cocktail, and the bureaucracy for serving alcohol in Lancaster is insane. So why don't we just make like fancy sodas that are crafted the way cocktails are crafted, with real ingredients, with real heart and soul behind it. And you know, they'll have something to quench their thirst that popcorn gives them. And then after a while, because there wasn't anything in the area that served craft beverages that were non-alcoholic, so local businesses just got really curious and started to approach us and say, how can we carry this in our coffee shops? How can we carry this in our stores? Because our customers don't want a coffee at 3 o'clock. It's too late in the day. They obviously can't have a cocktail. And then the other option really is Coke or Pepsi. And they don't want that either. They want something good for them and fresh and locally sourced. So I looked into it, started talking to craft brew people, and learned just kind of how easy it is to start a very small canning line. In the meantime, Mark and I had been vacationing down here in Puerto Rico. I hate the winter. I hate the feeling of being cold. So we would escape down here. And I don't, you know, for anybody that's ever been anywhere in the Caribbean, whenever you meet people here are obsessed with fruit, and they will shove fruit in your face, and you've never seen it before in your life. And it's the best thing you've ever had. But people here just want to share the abundance of the island with visitors. And at a certain point, it just kind of clicked that like I could start to source our fruit from here on the island where it's year round. I could kind of discover my own roots as a first generation Puerto Rican. And I could really kind of contribute to what I see is a total lack of attention that Puerto Rico is getting for its variety of fruits, for its kind of like high-end palate and its sophistication because of what people kind of assume of what's here.
So for you, this move is actually, it's very strategic from a business perspective because of the amazing fruit in Puerto Rico. It just up levels the company to even better ingredients, even better taste. That's exactly. Really cool. And there's your kind of background and kind of a cultural perspective for you. And we talked a little bit on the phone about like almost from a spiritual perspective, you coming back to your roots. And so it's this cool convergence for you.
Yeah.
For this point in your life.
Yeah.
And I see that actually with a lot of entrepreneurs where if they're really hitting their groove, stuff starts to happen like that, where it's like, oh, there's some cultural, spiritual perspective, there's a strategic business perspective, and you kind of like find your unique place in the universe, so to speak, which is my woo-woo speak.
That's true. I mean, I guess I kind of always conflated it with just my age. I've sort of observed a lot of other people in their mid-30s really starting to seek out, especially like Puerto Ricans, people of color, first, second, third generation of immigrants, really start to want to dig in and take seriously what that searching for your roots is. And I think that manifests in different ways for different people, different cultures. And I wish I could tell you what that drive is, where that comes from, what that desire is. But I know for me, yeah, my two worlds had sort of converged, and I had a new appreciation for my roots when I realized what the beauty of this island had, not just in general, but just like, oh, this isn't an island to escape from. There is something here to give to people if you're looking for the right thing.
Love that. What is for you, what is the deeper part around coming back to your roots, coming back to family? What does it do for you internally?
I mean, for me, I think I'm a little bit more unique. I think there are people like me, but I think my case is a little bit more unique. I think being brought up kind of in the States as a first generation Puerto Rican, where I actually didn't have a lot of context of my culture. My parents' main priority was assimilation. So they didn't teach us Spanish. They didn't really raise us around our family. We were raised in Northern Virginia. And because of that, we were often the only children of color surrounded by white people. And we were kind of pushed into this position of diplomacy for being Puerto Rican when we had zero context about it. And so as a little kid, you kind of struggled to be like, well, I know I'm different, but then like, I'm not exposed really that much to what makes me different. So as far as I know, I'm just like everybody else, until you start to grow up and start to understand those tiny little differences between your family and other people's family. And then for me personally, as I started to develop as a human and took an interest in art and took an interest in science, there was a lot of pressure to conform to one person's idea of what being Puerto Rican is. And I'm just kind of like, I don't accept things at face value. I'm super stubborn. So as soon as somebody tells me, well, you have to like this and you have to be like that, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And then, in my late 20s, it was like, I'm going to start going to Puerto Rico as an adult and start understanding these things for myself. And those first couple of trips were eye-opening because I truly didn't realize how much diversity we had within our culture. And I was both celebrating and kind of like in your facing about how we're not a homogenous culture, and to be Puerto Rican doesn't manifest in a look, in a belief, in a physical trait, even because we have such a diversity of physical traits in our culture, that it shifts to a very personal what it means to you to be Puerto Rican. And that's the general sentiment here on the island. And so I felt like when I got here, the more I came here, the more I started to understand just how nuanced it is to be Puerto Rican, and that those assertions only come from the States, from end products, byproducts of assimilation. And really here, this is a culture, this is a society like any place else that evolves, that has its individuals, that has its different subgroups and cultures, and understanding that I had the freedom to be whoever I want to be and still be proud to be Puerto Rican.
That's very cool. I've talked to Mark. I plan to visit, and so at some point we'll have to hang out and make our way around the island, which will be great. I made a note to come back to something here. Is I think with entrepreneurs and listeners of the podcast who are in many ways mostly entrepreneurs, it's helpful to hear how people are succeeding and where they're succeeding and what they're doing. I was talking to Gustavo the other day, and he had like 5 or 6 different revenue streams.
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. He's impressive.
I'm learning from him as I'm talking to him. And so where for listeners, like where are you succeeding right now? What is working for you?
I would say like the biggest kind of surprise success in especially the move is just how open people have been to not only like being into what we're doing, but wanting to get involved, wanting to provide resources. So just like the connections that I'm making here have been the biggest surprise of how many how much human resource I've kind of gathered since I've been here.
So it's the connections, the people that are willing to help and probably talk and spread the brand.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only that, but just kind of like there's kind of a growing movement here, post Maria, kind of how, and post COVID, really how the supply chain.
What was that first one?
Post Maria, Hurricane Maria.
Yeah.
Just kind of how the supply chain got completely interrupted. And the bureaucracy set up with the colonization of the island makes it so that we're not able to get food supplies from anybody but the United States. And when there are national emergencies, we kind of get screwed. So there's a movement here to create at least food sovereignty for the island. We have the soil, we have the manpower. It's just about coordinating it. And I think people seeing kind of what I'm trying to do with the sodas have really brought me into the fold of this fight and have empowered me that I have certain skills that can help move this fight forward.
Yeah. So that's the Puerto Rico piece. And you're also shipping to the US, all over the US, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, what if someone orders in like Montana, like what happens? Yeah. Like, how do you get it there?
A wish and a prayer. No, no, we're in that really weird stage of business where we're growing right now. So like the way we got sodas out to Montana 2 weeks ago is going to be different. The way we do it today is going to be different than the way we do it a week from now, 2 weeks from now. But basically, we source all of our ingredients here. I make relationships with very, very small farmers on the island. There aren't many corporate, big industrial islands here or farmers on the island. So we call them small fincas. I contract with them for their fruits. And it's a very handshake, eye to eye sort of deal. There's no websites for these people or fancy ordering. And then I get all of those raw materials down here to San Juan. I drop them off at a processing facility run by Leslie Cofresi, who owns La Factoria, which is like a James Beard award-winning bar. It's the most famous bar in all of Puerto Rico. And he has a syrup manufacturing facility. So they manufacture all of our syrups from our raw ingredients, all of our juices. And then right now, as we speak, we're moving all of our small batch processing equipment from Lancaster to here in San Juan. So we'll be able to, all of the specialty flavors, all of the very small runs of 500 cans or less will be sourced and made here on the island. And then we're in talks with a couple of bigger co-packers to take on our more regular flavors, so that all I have to do is send them the raw materials and they'll be able to package orange soda and light drink and move it right from New York to Lancaster, Philly, Montana.
Interesting. Got it. You're really in this stage of like scaling and some of it you just have to do ad hoc because you just have to get it there. But then building the processes and the systems and the ways that it would scale to actually work effectively and efficiently every time or most times.
That's exactly right. That's literally exactly right. Right now, I mean, luckily, Mark and I both are kind of built for pressure. We both kind of perform best under pressure. So when those orders comes in and we have 3 days, there's something that clicks in both of our brains that we're able to just like get it done. But we're definitely both at a point where as we grow the business and as we have new goals for the business, we feel like our time is spent doing better things. And so we're actually in the middle of building that machine, that logistical machine, so that we're not running around anymore.
Yeah. It eventually gets tiring.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tiring the whole time, but eventually can lead to burnout.
Yeah, exactly.
After several years of doing it. Cool. Let me check the notes. Oh yeah, what's the vision then? Do you want to just take this all the way to being Pop Shop like internationally? Like, do you want to exit? Like, curious, what's your?
Yeah, we have like a couple of plans. I can definitely see myself obviously like strengthening our sourcing sources, and building a community that way. Sort of the byproduct of just being here is that somehow we've brought together all of the different beverage makers here on the island and have formed a little bit of a community. So outside of just like sodas and profits, there are those sort of like social goals and components that we have built into the business, that we desire to make a difference in. So being able to create a community of makers and artisan food and beverage makers here on the island is going to help with that overall goal of food sovereignty. Furthermore, with the sodas, I want to get to 100% locally sourced from the island. That's a really big goal, because not everything gets grown here. And sometimes like our grow seasons get crazy with the hurricanes. So those are kind of more ambitious goals. And yeah, one step at a time. We truly see this kind of taking over right now, the Diaspora Central Market. So that's Philly tri-state area, obviously here on the island, Chicago, Southern California, and then moving with Latin America, we're just trying to blanket the market as much as possible. I think we do see kind of an end goal here, kind of having somebody take over the manufacturing of the sodas, and we focus more on our core goals of contracting fruit and creating opportunities for fincas and large contracts so that we can continue to have an economy around fresh food here on the island.
Mm. You mentioned diaspora. Can you explain that to listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so well, there's many different diasporas. African diaspora, and then that can be broken down into many different diasporas, the Jewish diaspora. But the Puerto Rican diaspora is really particularly interesting for obvious reasons, because I'm in it, so I find it interesting. But we have such a huge, varied history and placement now. So basically that means that, we have Puerto Ricans, something like 13 million Puerto Ricans on the island. And then there's something like 39 million Puerto Ricans in the world. So that our diaspora is bigger than our island. And I guess for Puerto Ricans right now, we're actually trying to figure out what it means to be a part of the diaspora. Many of us, I think, for the longest time up until recently, the whole world thought the Puerto Rican diaspora consisted of Puerto Rico and New Yorkers. But I was not ever part of the New Eurekan. A lot of Puerto Ricans came out of New Eurekans. But a lot of Puerto Ricans, one thing that's interesting to Lancaster people is that the reason that we have so many Puerto Ricans in Lancaster specifically is because the Mennonites and the Quakers were sent to Puerto Rico as conscientious objectors to World War I, II, and Vietnam. So they've been here for a minute. While they were here, they kind of got in on the agrarian culture that was going on here in Puerto Rico. And so what they were doing to fill sort of the labor holes that they left back on their family farms is they would send Puerto Rican migrant farmers to Lancaster to help fill in for the Quakers and the Mennonites. And that's how my great aunt ended up over there, who then brought my grandma over, who then brought my dad over. So all of us kind of have like very interesting stories like that. And we all have different positions in the diaspora, different views of the diaspora. But I think for us, ultimately, there's something physical that happens in the presence of another diaspora member where you feel like you're with family. And I think, I don't know that that's unique to the Puerto Rican diaspora. I think that's diasporas in general, and maybe that's that unknown that makes a diaspora a diaspora.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I
don't know if that answers your question about diasporas. Like, I could go on about it.
Absolutely. It's the 13 million people in Puerto Rico. I mean, this is my understanding. The 13 million people in Puerto Rico. There's 39 Puerto Rican people in the world. Anytime you meet a different Puerto Rican person, there's like an instant connection at some level. There's some migration. There was a migration to different places, including the US. There's some migration back.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to figure out what it means and what it involves. And
yeah, I think really the Puerto Ricans that I talk to, and I know myself specifically, we're trying to get more organized with what our diaspora means to be more like, say, the Jewish diaspora, where they are organized. They have Jewish youth going to Israel for free in their gap year and like trying to get them to hook up with other Jews. And I'm like, we need something like that.
Nice. I have a feeling it would be a little more party or dance involved.
1,000%. 1,000%.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. We talked about success and how you are scaling and how you think about it. I also want to hit, there's the other side, which we all know. You and I talked on the phone about this, is the challenges and the oh shit moments.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I said, I'll ask you to tell a story of an oh shit moment. You said, wow, there's been so many. So will you talk a little bit about oh shit moments or a moment specifically?
I mean,
in the history of the company.
Honestly, I'm a huge failure and I'm proud of it. Like I have just failed so many times, and a lot of times in those failures, like I have found new opportunities, and it's just, sometimes it's like, oh, I had to fail to find this opportunity. And sometimes it's literally just shitty and there's no other reason but for you to like fail on your face. But like the example that comes to mind is when Mark and I met in the social enterprise pitch. So in 2017.
That was in Harrisburg or Lancaster?
In Lancaster.
Yeah.
In 2017, every year, Lancaster kind of puts a call out to entrepreneurs that are running a business that makes a thing or has a product or has a service, but also wants to make a difference in their realm, a social difference. And so Mark and I met there. I was running a magazine called The Townie. that was an art magazine that I felt that represented the demographics of the city. That was in competition with two other magazines that were art magazines, but only showed white artists, which was very weird considering the city was 60% people of color. So I sought to right this wrong. I got into the social enterprise pitch. And not only is it, weeks of acceleration training, and just general business training, but there's an element of fundraising at the end. And I am just like historically bad at sales. I don't like asking for money. I'm bad at closing, all the bad things. And as much as like they put us through the ringer about budgeting and running your business, and I just got basically an MBA education on running a business, when it came to fundraising, they were just like, okay, now go ask for money.
Yeah.
And I felt like, which is exactly
it's like
how
a
it
fight or
went.
flight response, yeah?
1,000%. And that's exactly how it went. It was like an 8-week period or something of fundraising. And the girl who won raised something like $81,000, something ridiculous. And I raised $800. And this is a small town, so this is kind of a big deal. It's very public. Not only is the event public and the whole situation public, but I'm on the public art board. So I am public. And I had a very public failure. And
was it like a headline like Sophie
it really felt like it.
raises $800?
It really felt like it, when the day after I got messages of consolation and like, oh girl, like you need a drink, come out. And it just made it so much worse. You were just like, guys, I got there. I raised $800. Like, I don't know. It was so embarrassing. But in that, not to kind of like make it, oh, failures are amazing. You have to, it's definitely 1,000% about your perspective. 100%.
And I want to draw this out actually, because it's an important point, because so much of the entrepreneurial community and ecosystems, we try and like skip over it, or there's like cliches to like try and skip over it. But in those moments, I mean, I've had those moments. It's devastating. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want listeners and viewers to get that. Like it feels like, for me, it feels like I'm dying at some level.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely like held up in my apartment for a week or two, could not show my face publicly, shut down my social medias. Not only that, but I felt really kind of hurt, I guess, by the community too. That this was a thing that everybody wanted and was so behind. And I just felt like, was anybody really into it? Or I just had a lot of mixed feelings. I think where people get tripped up is they fail and they kind of like sit around and wait for the silver lining, and they sit around and wait for that new opportunity, or sit around and wait to figure out, well, if everything happens for a reason, then what's this reason? And then I can feel better and move on because I have the reason. And it's not exactly like that. It's still kind of embarrassing to think about that all of these people saw this huge struggle, that I had to just raise money, free money for my business. But at the same time, it gave me the opportunity to shift my mind in a way that I wouldn't have shifted my mind otherwise. So in that, I was so singularly focused on creating this magazine, on creating this platform for local artists to emerge and leveling the playing field for emerging artists in Lancaster, that had that kind of like gone through, when I failed, I was able to reassess and be like, okay, do I really want to be in Lancaster for my whole life doing this?
Mm.
Or do I kind of want to take a bigger chunk out of the world and make a bigger difference and have my skills and my difference not only just affect Lancaster, but like a bigger chunk of the world. And so when I say it's my perspective, it's really just that. Like, I would not have had an opportunity to this day. Let's say I raised $12,000 and I had a couple years of operating costs for the magazine, which first of all is a terrible business. Whoever said to get into a magazine, it's like a bad idea. But
the market speaks.
yeah, honestly. And that would have been my life. And I think when I first set out to do this, it was always, when I first set out to create spaces for artists, it was always deep down, I knew it was always for the benefit of this greater good. And I knew I only just wanted to start in Lancaster. And so if I had succeeded, then I would just have to keep following through and maybe sort of hit a ceiling at some point. And that, you know, the fact that I failed, I was able to be like, okay, well, I got to look at other things now. And, oh, I can make a bigger difference over here.
It reminds me of the Steve Jobs quote, which is quoted often in these types of situations, which is that you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backward. And so,
I've never heard that, but yeah. Yep. Yep.
I want to transition to your, because this is a good segue, is your entrepreneurial lessons for your, imagine you're speaking to a group of young entrepreneurs, people that are up and coming. What are Sophie's entrepreneurial lessons? What would you tell them? That we just drew out maybe one or two there, but what else would you tell them?
Honestly, kind of my big one would be, I mean, this is just like a shout out to the young artists out there. Being an artist and being an entrepreneur not only aren't mutually exclusive, but go hand in hand in today's world. In fact, it's done been the artists that have been the entrepreneurs from the get. And it's just, you know, some suits that have told us, well, you're creative, we're business. You're creative, you're business. And it's the creatives that come up with the good ideas. And it's the creatives that have always been the one to figure out how to feed themselves without having to give up too much of themselves. And now there are ways that you can more securely make a living through entrepreneurship with art, and you don't have to face the starving artist. You can create opportunities for yourself through art. And that's kind of my biggest, I think, takeaway is entrepreneurship, if you're creative, can be the biggest exercise in creativity.
One of the listeners of the podcast is Giovanna. Shout out to Giovanna. She's an artist and a musician, and she's into dance.
Yeah.
What would you tell her? Like, how does she turn that into a business in some way?
So, like, right off the bat, like, you have to think with your creative mind the opportunities you want to have as an artist. So yeah, I would love it if people bought my felt sculptures for hundreds of $1,000s, and that's how I made money. And all I could do was sculpture all day and draw, and people bought. And certainly that's one way to make money through art. That's literally one way to make money through art. There are teams of people that support other artists. Just look at like production designers. They're artists that create art for artists. They're creating a production for a musician. There are graphic artists that create those crazy digital displays you see when you go to a concert. You know, everywhere there's art now. And so you can literally decide, you know what, I don't want to practice art for money. I want to practice art personally, but I want to be beside the art world. And you can be an art administrator. You can, you know, now you can be like, what do they call them? Influencers online. And, you know, you can.
I've been following Austin Kleon. I'll put it in the show notes. This guy, have you heard of this guy?
No.
He's got these cool pieces of art and books, right? And he draws, and they're kind of goofy, but it's like his brand, and it's really cool.
And then, you know, there's also like public art, which is municipally funded art. And even the smallest towns have public art boards that are open to the public to join. And you can get involved in your local art scene. That will open up all of those opportunities for you to network and find out where you can really like start to make your moves in art and entrepreneurship, because these days with the internet, it's a good and a bad. Anybody can be an artist, which is great and sometimes bad. But also, like, you got to get out there and hustle. You got to learn about markets, and you got to learn about customer bases and people that your art's going to communicate to, and not worry about the people that your art doesn't communicate to, just like a business person. And, you know, going back to my point about public art, that's something that I do. So that creates a purpose where municipalities aren't just going to spend money to make something on a park. That's ridiculous and naive to think. They use those processes. They use the art. They use the data that they gather from their constituents when creating that art to create resources and distributions of resources. So I've been able to create programs that involve public art, whole neighborhoods coming out to create a piece of art together so that the municipality can gather data on a level surface, not town halls, on a level surface, peer-to-peer, understanding what their neighbors, what their constituents' needs are, and create a more equitable distribution of resources. Because as it stands now, municipalities are just starting to understand that $100 to this neighborhood and $100 to this neighborhood and $100 to this neighborhood is not equitable distribution of resources. So art now has a function in the most valuable thing, data.
These seemingly disparate things have a really cool way of coming together when you're an entrepreneur, and your love of art and passion for art feeds right into Pop Shop brand, and then data, like you're saying, and it's the overlap, which is what I've been writing about now. It's the overlap of our interests where the magic actually happens.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%.
Sophie, this has been delightfully enjoyable. How can people find you online? What would you like to leave listeners with?
Well, everybody definitely follow the Pop Shop at How I Pop on social media. Mark, my partner, heads up the marketing, and he just does such a good job of social media. I'm at Lil Sophie Big Roman. I'm not real
Big Roman.
Lil Sophie, like Lil Sophie, Big Roman. I just post my adventures of the island, of traveling, of fruit, and just kind of cool hijinks I get into here on the island. But if anybody's coming to Puerto Rico, feel free to hit me up. I will give you all the recommendations, and make sure you guys have a good time.
You've heard it here, so be careful. Careful what you wish for. You might get an inundation of requests to visit Puerto Rico, including me. Thank you, Sophie. Let's wrap there, and I will be in touch.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Go.